Today we're going to be looking at the rise and fall of Godrick the Grafted, or should I say the Golden. Behind these walls sits a man who calls himself a god. Golden blood runs through him. This is the story of Godrick, a name that was supposed to mean everything, carried by a man who could never quite live up to it. To understand Godrick, you have to understand the name he was born under and the shadow that came with it. He is blood of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, the warrior who stood beside Queen Marika when the Golden Order was still being written into the world. That's not a small thing to carry. That's the kind of lineage that gets carved into stone, sung about, and worshipped. But by the time Godrick is born, that golden blood has been diluted through generation after generation, thinned out until barely a trace of the original power remains. Finger reader Ina, one of the most perceptive voices in this world, doesn't mince words about it.
Godrick the Grafted was but a distant relation, the runt of the litter. His divine blood sorely diluted.
And it's not like he's given the luxury of being a quiet, forgotten branch of the family tree. He's surrounded constantly by cousins and siblings who make the comparison worse. Radahn, a demigod so powerful he's called the Scourge of the Stars. Malenia, unbeaten in a fair fight ever. Margot, holding an entire capital together through sheer force of will. Rykard, carving a bloody reputation across Mount Galmor before he's even a lord of anything. Every single one of them makes Godrick's inheritance look smaller by comparison. So Godrick grows up being told implicitly and explicitly that he is a disappointing branch of a golden family. Golden in name, golden in blood, but nowhere near golden in stature. And that's a pressure that doesn't just sit on a person. It calcifies. It becomes a lens through which everything else happens to him. The moment everything changes is the death of Godwyn, the golden demigod whose passion shatters the Elden Ring itself. Queen Marika, in her grief and her fury, breaks the ring into shards. Each one of her children, every demigod holding a fragment of that power, becomes a rival in a war none of them asked for. This is the shattering, and the capital in Lindell itself, the Golden Order Godrick was raised to believe in, starts eating itself alive. Now think about where that leaves him. He is already the runt of the litter, already dim, watered down, end of a golden bloodline surrounded by demigods who can level armies without breaking a sweat. And now the entire structure that used to protect him, the order, the hierarchy, the family, is gone. It's just war, and war doesn't care about lineage, it cares about power, something Godrick has never really had. Every other shard bearer in this moment is doing something, fighting, marching, asserting a claim, and Godrick, golden blood, diluted blood, has to make a choice about what kind of demigod he is going to be when the pressure finally lands on him. He's about to find out, and it's not going to be kind to him. When the capital turns on him, Godrick doesn't stand and fight for his place. He's hounded out of Lindell during the shattering, and rather than face whatever is coming to him, he grabs a hoard of treasures on his way out, including one particular item stolen from Queen Marika herself, the Mimic's Veil, and he uses it to hide among the women fleeing the capital, and slips out of the city undetected, unseen, unchallenged. Let that sit for a second. A descendant of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, blood that's supposed to mean strength, escapes the single most important conflict of his life, not through combat, not through strategy, but by disguising himself and hiding among people fleeing for their lives. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying the video so far, a like would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, back to the video. Godrick makes it south to Stormvale, a castle with no ruler, so he claims the fortress as his own, and there he shuts the gates. Not to prepare an offense, not to rally an army for conquest, he hides. Specifically, he hides from General Radahn, a demigod so overwhelming in raw power that Godrick doesn't even attempt to contest it. He simply retreats behind Stormvale's walls and waits, hoping Radahn has better things to do than bother with him. And Radahn, by most accounts, barely even notices. That's its own quiet cruelty. Godrick is so far beneath Radahn's attention that he isn't even worth pursuing. But hiding from Radahn isn't the humiliation people remember him for. That comes next. Taking over Stormvale gives Godrick confidence. He has a throne again, an army, and he is a demigod after all. So when Malenia, Blade of Miquella, marches south through his territory, Godrick doesn't hide from her. he does something almost irrational. He insults her, provokes her.
Maybe he believes his own strength. Maybe he thinks he's untested, unproven, that this would be an easy demonstration of his strength for once in his life.
He is wrong. Completely, humiliatingly wrong. Melania beats him without much difficulty, and Godrick doesn't die fighting. He doesn't go down swinging. He drops to his knees and he begs. He begs for his life in front of her. He drops further down, licking at her feet, and the display is so degrading that even his own men speak of it with kind of embarrassed disbelief. The aftermath is just as ugly. His army, already dim, collapses further. Soldiers desert, morale disintegrates, and the campaign he started to prove himself ends with a burned village, a broken force, and a reputation in ruins. He crawls back to Stormvale, having now failed twice in the most visible, most public way possible. Think about what that does to a man who's already told his entire life that his blood was too diluted to matter. He fled the capital in disguise, he hid from one demigod out of pure fear, he lost to another, badly, and begged on his knees to be allowed to live. Every single humiliation confirms the exact thing he was always afraid of, that the golden name means nothing if the blood behind it can't be backed up. This is where his desperation transforms into something much worse, because Godrick doesn't spend that isolation quietly licking his wounds. He turns to grafting, the forbidden, grotesque practice of tearing the limbs and powers of other beings loose and forcing them onto a body that isn't built to hold them. Not as a last resort, as the answer, the one thing left that might actually make the humiliation stop. And there's a bitter irony buried in that choice, because it isn't the first time someone from this lineage has bound another creature's body to his own. Godfrey himself, the first Elden Lord, carried the beast regent, Siros, clinging to his shoulder. Not quite grafting in the same cynical sense Godrick practices, but close enough in spirit that the parallel writes itself. Siros' teeth sink into Godfrey's shoulders to hold him back from his own ceaseless bloodlust, a restraint, a leash on power he already had too much of. Godrick does the opposite. He grafts to manufacture power he never had in the first place. Where Godfrey's attachment was about control, Godrick's is about compensation. The first Elden Lord bound the beast to himself to stay a man. His deluded descendant binds anything he can get his hands on to stop being one. And once he starts, he does not stop at himself. Godrick sends his own soldiers out on hunts. Hunts for Tarnished, hunts for anyone with a body worth taking apart, dragging fresh subjects back to Stormvale to be harvested for parts. The dining halls filled with severed limbs and the courtyards filled with dismembered. It gets stranger and more unsettling the further you look. Even the hawks patrolling Stormvale's walls have had their talons sliced away and replaced with razor-fine swords grafted in their place. Killing machines built out of animals that never asked for it. And then there are the grafted scions. Abhorrent things built from a tangle of limbs seemingly forced onto the bodies of children. Any restraint Godrick had left by this point is gone. This isn't a demigod refining a weapon anymore. This is a man who has lost his mind entirely, grafting anything he can reach in a spiraling, almost frantic attempt to become something he was told his whole life he could never be. Whatever ambitions he once had of proving his place among the golden lineage didn't just quietly fade after that. They spiraled into obsession. A demigod locked away in his own castle, surrounded by the results of his own unraveling, nursing the memory of running, hiding, and begging by carving himself into something new. Which brings us to now, the moment a nameless Tarnished, guided by grace, walks through the gates of Stormvale, and everything we've talked about is right there, laid out in the architecture itself. The Tarnished doesn't need Godrick to explain his descent. It's hanging from the ceilings, piled in the corners, perched on the rampart with swords for talons. This is a castle that has been quietly documenting one demigod's unraveling for years, before anyone ever showed up to end it.
Mighty dragon, thou the true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights. Well. and the I am the Lord of all that is golden.
What follows isn't really a fight so much as Godrick throwing everything he has left at them. And when that isn't enough, when the humiliation of losing yet again starts creeping back in, he does the only thing he knows how to do anymore. He cuts off his own hand mid-fight and grafts the dragon's head straight onto the stump, yelling for his ancestors, for Godfrey, for every golden name he was never able to live up to, for the entire lands between to finally break to his power and finally see something worth fearing. Except it isn't even a powerful dragon, it's a lesser one, young, comparatively weak, the kind of dragon the game itself classifies well below the true ancients that appear elsewhere in the lands between. Even the one moment Godrick demands the whole world watch him become powerful, what he's actually holding up is something feeble, a demonstration of strength that was, like everything else about him, smaller than the performance around it. It is, in a strange way, the most honest moment of his entire story. Every single time Godrick has been backed into a corner, his answer has been to take something that isn't his and force it onto himself. This is just the last time he gets to try, and even now, reaching for a god's power, he only manages to grab a scrap of one. It doesn't save him. The Tarnus brings him down, claims his great rune, and just like that, the man who ran from Lindell, hid from Adon, and begged at Melania's feet is gone. Not in a blaze of glory, but the way he lived the back half of his life, overreaching, outmatched, and out of borrowed time. Godrick's story isn't really about strength or weakness, it's about pressure. The pressure of a name too big to live up to, and what happens to a person when every attempt to prove themselves worthy of it ends in retreat, fear, and humiliation. He was born into gold, he just could never convince the world, or himself, that he'd earned it.